Hi, I'm Skinny Cheeks. Today we got some more news from ZOS about the Update 35 combat changes. This time an update from Gina and the team. So I'll read through the post and give my thoughts along the way. Hi everyone, we wanted to take a minute to give you some insight into some additional changes coming to the PTS affecting combat and balance. As we've continued reading through your feedback from testing these changes, we determined that some of our goals were actively competing with each other and not reaching the target audiences in ways we intended. We ultimately want to help raise the floor and reduce the ceiling in regard to DPS output, while simultaneously improving class balance in some problematic areas. So far, this has led to competing changes that have hurt some groups of players, despite us saying we didn't want to actively harm playstyles with any particular change. We are committed to following through with additional ways to mitigate these issues while still meeting our intended goals. Well, good on them to acknowledge what we have been saying since week 1 of the PTS. I honestly didn't know if we'd be hearing anything or not. So far, we haven't really had a whole lot of communication on it. So yeah, I mean, they're owning up to it. It's a good start. With all of that said, in next week's PTS patch, you'll find that we will be re-evaluating some of the adjustments to light and heavy attacks so they are a bit less drastic. Light and heavy attacks will once again scale with your stats, just to a lesser extent than before. Overall, there will still be a nerf on light attack damage, but this will allow us to give a lot more love to heavy attacks and will be less stark of a difference. So to me, this was actually one of the lesser felt impacts of the patch, but regardless, it did bring DPS levels down, so it's nice to see that this won't be as drastic as it originally was. There will also be a handful of tweaks to some class abilities in next week's PTS patch based on the feedback we've received, but the majority of these will come in the final week 5 PTS patch. Note that the focus of these adjustments will be on Magicka-based Nightblades, Wardens, and Sorcerers. So everybody, don't freak out when there isn't much info in the week 4 patch notes about this. It looks like they have a good bit in store for week 5. Additionally, for dungeons and trials, we'll be reducing the health of all bosses on veteran difficulty and above in the final PTS patch to account for the overall DPS loss. For trials specifically, we'll be reducing the health of all champions and bannermen on veteran difficulty and above. The reduction in health for each boss will vary from encounter to encounter, but the results should be that each dungeon and trial boss fight will provide a similar challenge to what is on live currently. The trial bannermen and champions provide a challenge in their own right, so we felt additional adjustments were warranted. So these bannermen and champions, these are some of those elite trash mobs that have a bit more health, they have a bit harder mechanics. So it's nice to see that they won't be forgetting about those. One thing I'm hoping though is that all trial bosses are not just adjusted equally. They did say it will vary from encounter to encounter. I think newer ones probably need the most adjustment, while the older ones could probably be tweaked to a bit lesser extent. This could, if done right, potentially create a situation where the difficulty gap in the older and newer content is not so drastic. I think it would be a lot healthier for the game if the curve from starting through the Craglorns up through Rockgrove and Dreadsail was not as steep as it is now. We'll just have to wait and see how they end up handling that. But let's read on. We recognize there has been a lot of concern surrounding the combat changes currently on the PTS, and we truly believe with some continued adjustments and iterations, this is the best course of action for the long-term health of the game. We're also working on a brief Q&A that should help address some of the more general questions surrounding these changes. Thanks for reading and, of course, taking the time to provide so much in-depth and valuable feedback. Well, thank you, Gina. We really do appreciate you all communicating with us on this. I won't say this solves everything, but I definitely think this is another step in the right direction. They've owned up to this not hitting the mark, and that's great. But ultimately, we'll have to see the specifics of their adjustments before we can really know if this alleviates a lot of our concerns. Code replied to this feedback, and I agree. I'm a little concerned about the incoming damage still due to them nerfing healing output potential. I think things will be doable, but it seems like it might be a bit more of a struggle on some fights than in previous patches. But I am less worried about that than I was about the DPS. And as I was putting this together, we did get a response from Finn as well, the lead encounter designer. Hey folks, one note regarding the content changes. I previously stated we wanted to gather as much information as possible to gauge the impact of combat changes on the content in the game. This is a multi-pronged approach, which is a collaboration between the combat, dungeon, and QA teams, as well as player feedback, logs, and captures. Given the overwhelming response and the wealth of information we have collected, we felt confident that we could make these content changes in order to ensure that the game maintained the challenge players are used to without a major shift in difficulty. Again, thanks to the community members that have logged onto the PTS, played, reported, and provided feedback, logs, and video captures. So what this looks like to me is them saying, hey, this is an ongoing process that we'll be working together with the other teams on, but essentially we don't want people to feel like they've taken a big step backwards for the patch, so we're going to make sure that we go ahead and at least make the initial round of adjustments before this thing goes live. So say what you want, but this really shows me that they have been listening and that they want to make this an easier transition into update 35. But I'm really curious to see where this all ends up. So stay tuned. As always, I'll be covering the important combat changes from the weeks 4 and 5 patch notes, and I'll do my best to break it all down for you guys. So what do you think about the response that they gave here today? Let me know in the comments below. A big thanks to my current Patreon supporters and YouTube members. Link is in the description if you're interested in helping out that way. And a special thanks to Nicholas, Simon, Cougars Bay and the Cougar City Guild, the Order of War Guild, Iffy, Cantankerous Cat, Shady, Blake1816, Mordecai1212, Santanico, Nalandia, Hey It's Spork, Florian, and Vidridi. Thanks again for stopping by. I'll see y'all in the next one. Bye.